So Sebastian now is going to moderate the next panel on the role of the trio presidency. As we heard from the results which Faustine announced, there's an issue with some member states. That's where it's seen that there's a little bit of backtracking. We heard from Mr. Samson that the Parliament, refreshingly, has kept its mojo. The European Commission has too. But there's a real challenge with some of the member states to really be as ambitious as we'd all like them to be. This is on the role of the trio presidency and Spain in keeping the ambition for the Green Deal. Over to you, Sebastian.
Thanks a lot. The idea is to continue the conversation, actually, looking at the next presidencies, as Joe was just saying. And the objectives of this roundtable are to take stock of the progress of the Green Deal in light of the progresses of legislative initiatives, but also the current changes with of course, the crisis, the Ukraine war, and the energy and food price crisis that go with it. Sorry, not the Ukraine war, the Russian war in Ukraine would be a proper way to say it. We also want to discuss the need to complement what are the other policies that we need to develop in the next presidencies. And of course, we would be really happy to have our eminent panelists react to what they've heard about the Green Deal Barometer, and in particular, how to support the major players in different countries in order to make the experts, the sustainability experts, be wrong about the future and their skepticism about the Green Deal being implemented. For that, we have a very good panel, a very eminent panel. We have the chance to have Jan Dusík, Deputy Environment Minister from the Czech Republic, just coming back from Luxembourg. And thank you very much for being online with us. Can you hear us, Mr. Dusík?
Yes, I can see and hear you very well at the moment. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much. That's a good news from us. We'll see how we can arrange the sound. We also have in the room Pascal Canfin. Pascal, maybe you want to join me on stage. Pascal Canfin, who is of course, a member of the European Parliament, but particularly the chair of the Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety. Thank you very much for being with us live. And also probably, given the current very active discussions, your agenda might be extremely complicated. Thanks for making the time. So all along the conference, the idea was to be able to organize Troika type, so three presidencies across successive presidencies. But from the program, there is a slight difference. We just heard yesterday that former Minister of the Environment for France, Barbara Pompili, who had been active in the negotiation of the French presidency of the European Union, cannot join us because she's busy in Parliament. She's been elected and she's in procedural votes that are actually extremely central for the life of the Parliament in France. And so she sends her apologies for that. We've asked, in the idea that we continue the idea of successive presidencies, our colleague Måns Nilsson, who is the director of the Stockholm Environment Institute, to step in and talk from the Swedish presidency. Thanks you so much, Måns. Maybe you could join me also on stage. I acknowledge that this is going to be an all-male panel, which is something that we do not like to happen at IDRI. But I think given the circumstances, this is something we could rearrange, and I hope you can bear with that. So this is, thanks so much, Måns, for stepping in on short notice. So the idea would be to jump directly into the conversation with the panel. And I would begin with Pascal Canfin. From the European Parliament's point of view, Pascal, what is your appreciation of the state of play of the negotiations in European Parliament before what happened in the Council in the last days? How did you see the various compromises, the various arrangements that have been reached on the subjects of the Fit for 55 package? And what would you identify as the priorities during the trilogue negotiations with the Council? And of course, what are in your opinion, the main challenges for greening not only the energy sector, but also the agriculture sector that we've been discussing quite a lot? pick on from those questions what you think is the most important, of course.
Happy to be with you this afternoon. Well, you know, maybe just to have the big picture in mind, the Green Deal, or what we call the Green Deal, is a set of more than 50 legislative proposals. I'm talking only here about the legislative proposals. You could include in the Green Deal the climate action plan of the European Central Bank, which to my view is definitely part of the Green Deal, but it's not a legislative proposal. You could add the transformation of EIB, European Investment Bank, into the Climate Bank of the EU, which is definitely part of the Green Deal, which is not a legislative proposal. So just to give you the sense of what we deal with in terms of legislative proposal, it's 50 laws, 50 European laws, as diverse as the reform of the Growth and Stability Pact, because we definitely negotiate the fact that we have some sort of special something, too early to say, on the public green investment capacity, including the text we are negotiating now on financial regulation for banks and for insurance companies. And of course, the most traditional ones on pesticides, Fit for 55, car, trucks, and so on, and so on, and so on. So as a whole, what you should have in mind is 50 texts. Within these 50 texts, 15 were part of the Fit for 55 package. And on top of that, you have everything which is related to the usual green agenda, so chemical, pesticide, biodiversity, pollution, air quality, climate, and so on, plus the extension of the scope of the fight, I would say, to new territories, ECB, EIB, financial regulation, taxonomy, and so on. And when you put all that together, it's just massive and unprecedented. And I don't even know if the experts you referred to in the survey are completely aware of that. So, to be honest, that's the fact that as a chair of the ENVI Committee, I have the capacity to work on all the dimensions of the Green Deal, helped me, and we are not that many, of course, Dideric is part of that small team, to be able to cover all the scopes. And then what we are after is, of course, not a cosmetic change, but a systemic change. Because when you change at the same time ECB monetary policy plus EIB plus 50 laws, you deliver on systemic change. Then I could cherry pick some elements of this package to illustrate, but I will miss a big part unless you ask questions on the 50 laws. But then I will need 2 hours for real. So let's take what is the most recent one, which is the deal last night in the Council under the French Presidency on the Fit for 55. I can tell you that when we started, and Dideric, if he would be with us, I think would certainly confirm that when in the 14th of July, the Commission puts its massive climate package. I mean, we never negotiated 15 texts at the same time. And when you look at the French National Assembly, they never do so. I mean, we just do it piece per piece, which is, by the way, a difficulty in the capacity to create a narrative and a good understanding of what we are doing. So this time we made the opposite. It's a wide package. But of course, the risk is that then you get lost in translation, because then if one out of the 15 gets stuck, then as it is a package, you wait for the rest. And we managed in the Council to have this, the whole package agreed last night, and in the Parliament, the key elements of the package agreed 2 weeks ago, except one which is key and still remaining and will be in September, which is the Renewable Energy Directives. But beyond this, the very core of the package is agreed. So in less than 1 year, 11 months, it's really, really a very good result. And then now we go to the trilogues. But we go to the trilogues with a very good basis on both sides. Of course, we disagree on some elements, and I could comment on the disagreements, but we agree on one big thing, which was not a given, which is the end of non-zero emissions car sales by 2035. Just for you to appreciate and to assess the speed, the difference between the state of the debate now and a couple of years ago. In France, we had, I'm sure you remember, Nicolas Hulot as Environment Minister. In 2017, so 5 years ago, he managed to have 2040 as the end date for non-zero emission vehicles in France, 2040. And it was Nicolas Hulot. So supposedly the pioneering green thing. At the European level, for 450 million citizens, including Poland, including Hungary, including Malta, Cyprus, and so on, we managed to have it 100% 5 years earlier than what was considered 5 years ago as the new frontier. And we did it without creating massive tension in the union world and massive tension in the car makers community. Some agreed, some disagreed, intense lobbying, but no huge fight. It gives you the capacity to the flavor of the fact that we are able to speed up, and we agree both in the Council and in the Parliament on this key element of the package. So it's already negotiated quite easily. Same for the level of ambition on ETS. So the carbon market reform, we agree in the Parliament, in the Commission, in the Council on the exact same level of ambition. Of course, again, parameters will have to be discussed and renegotiated in the trilogues. We agree, and it's a global first, on the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So we are first in the world to do so, proposed by the Commission July. It's now formally agreed in the Council, formally agreed as a principle in the Parliament. We will negotiate parameters. What about exports? What about the timing for phasing out free allocation? If you have technical questions, of course, I would be happy to answer, but we agreed on the principle. We just negotiate 1 year here, 1 year there. So these three key elements are massive, and again, makes a real difference for transportation, because once we agree on cars, the next step is trucks, and the standard for trucks, it's next year. So once you have done trucks plus cars plus industry, you have a massive part of emissions. Then maybe to conclude, where I would say we still have, and for the energy system, it's about renewable energy directives, where, in a nutshell, the key elements that we are going to move from 22% on average at the EU level for renewables in the energy production to 45% in 7 years, because the new updated objective put in the law by the Commission, it was a couple of weeks ago in what we call Repower EU, is not anymore 40%, but 45%. Why? Because we want to speed up in the context of the war in Ukraine and reducing our dependency on Russian fossil fuels. Moving from 22 to 45 means that in 7 years, now to 2030, we will double. So in the next 7 years, we will install the equivalent in terms of installed capacity to what we installed in the last, let's say, 4 decades or 5 decades. Again, 7 years on one side, 40 years on the other. And to conclude, why we are able to deliver so much, even if nothing is perfect, but the world is barely perfect, is because there is a growing consensus that it's the direction, it is our interest, we have the technologies, and so on, it's cost efficient, and so on, and so on, and so on. Where we are not there yet, it's the food system, agriculture. And I know you are working very hard on that matter at the IDRI. Because then you have the core concept of green transition applied to agriculture, which is still challenged by some, and where we cannot find yet, and that's part of my role to try to give birth to that, to find a common ground, a common pathway with farmers and the food value chain. Because we usually in the public debate, it's mainly about farmers, but we all know that farmers are completely, what could be the right word? Constrained, yeah, that's the right word. Constrained with their commercial contract, with their cooperatives, and so on, so on. So they cannot move on their own. We have to move the whole value chain, or at least a big part of the value chain. And it's not there yet. And that's why I would say for the next 6 months, that will be a key element, because we have at least 2 texts, part of this 50 package, that will be on our negotiating table. The first one is the compulsory reduction of pesticides by 50% in 2030. So we have to agree on the definition of the rhythm of the burden allocation and so on and so on. So that will be a very interesting discussion. Second, on what we call the nature restoration law, that will give 10% of space for nature. And NGOs, including WWF, are very much committed to that. So that will be again. And I had a discussion with a lot of the unions in the EU, farmers' unions. They will fight as hell to kill this. Exactly as they did to kill the CAP reform. Because, again, CAP reform was criticized on one side, but I can tell you that a key element of the CAP reform, they don't like it, the farmers, which is the following. The following is that for the first time, we connect the CAP to the CAP and the EU environmental and climate legislation, where we say, it's explicit, the strategic national plans. So the strategic national plans are the core of the CAP. So it's the member states putting on the table of the Commission their plan. And on basis of this plan, either they receive the money or they don't. And in order to receive the money, which is obviously the core of the CAP, they have to be aligned with the EU climate and environmental legislation, which was definitely not the case so far. That's the core of the discussion. And that's why, and I negotiated this myself, so that's why I look at it very carefully. That's why it's very clear that the strategic national plan proposed by France something like 3 months ago is not aligned with our the EU climate and environmental legislation. And that's why the Commission is asking France to work again. And basically, it will come in the coming days, where France will have to review its first draft, which is good. And I don't have any issue with this, but that's a fight we won, that we give this power to the Commission. So, but I can tell you that contrary to the rest, where we negotiate parameters, here we negotiate on the principle. And that's why we need, and I want to say that I work very well with your team on this, to trying to create what could be a common ground, a pathway that is both climate and environmental friendly, and that makes sense for a real farmer in Brittany or in Poland or in the Netherlands. Otherwise, we will always have difficulties to move forward. So I stop there. I can tell you that we need, well, we need expertise, but we need also pressure coming from civil society, and we need concrete proposals to make alliance with the progressive part of the business community. Because once you have a deal with the progressive part of the business community, you have a deal. We would have never done the end of non-zero emission cars by 2035 if big ones, let's start with Volkswagen, but not only, wouldn't be supportive of that because of the lobbying. Because if you are facing the whole wall of the specific industry. So one day it's a pesticide, the second one is car, the Wednesday is a chemical, and the fourth day is another one, cement or aluminum, then you lose. If you are able to break that wall and to say, okay, this part is conservative, doesn't want to lose, but this part is progressive because they have invested in green technologies, and then we can have a deal. Then you make what we call in politics triangulation. I don't know if it's in English, triangulation, for you for the translation. And we win, and we win. And that's exactly as well what we are doing on imported deforestation, another file of this 50, where we have a deal. We built this regulation with a progressive part of the business, and it flies. So it's very important to have this connection between think tanks, NGOs, progressive part of the business, to help us delivering on this text. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pascal Canfin. That was really interesting. And to some extent, we had a question before on who are the member states who are blocking, or can we understand this political economy within the Council? But you answered through another angle. That was really interesting. I know that the Deputy Minister Dusík is in a kind of a hurry, but I would like, if you allow me, Mr. Dusík, that we first hear 4 minutes of Commissioner Sinkevičius. Thank you very much, Mr. Dusík.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be honest. Keeping the green transition in the spotlight and on track has become more challenging today than it was 2 years ago. With the pandemic and the ongoing war in Ukraine, there are voices that question the European Green Deal. And citizens who ask us, can we afford it when the price of food and energy continues to rise? These are questions we need to take seriously, questions we need to address. The war is a reminder of the things we take for granted. Not just peace and security, but also clean water, clean air or healthy soils. And like COVID, the war and its impacts unveil our vulnerabilities and also show the importance of the EU's social fabric. When prices rise, inequalities also increase between rich and poor, but between richer and poorer countries as well. That's why the just transition is an essential element of the European Green Deal. Our deal will only work if it is fully inclusive. Green policies are vital for nature. They are vital for climate and environment, but they are equally important for society, the economy and health, and even for our security. So let me be clear. This appalling war is not a reason to delay the Green Deal, but it is a very good reason to intensify our work on implementation. Sticking to our long-term Green Deal objectives is the only path to greater resilience. In this context, I very much welcome your work on the Green Deal Barometer, and I would like to thank all those involved in it for their commitment. It is a great tool for taking the pulse. It shows us the work to do on the path to a transition that's green and just. Looking at the findings, respondents see the most progress on climate files. That's in line with the priorities of the European Commission and our drive for carbon neutrality by the middle of the century. It is also reassuring to see that despite COVID-19 and the geopolitical challenges, respondents are cautiously optimistic about the green transition. But I take note, as well as of concerns they express. There is plenty more work to do on tackling the other crises in addition to climate change. The work continues at speed to implement our farm to fork strategy. We are revising EU rules for air and water under the zero pollution ambition. And we have just proposed new legislation for nature with legally binding targets to restore ecosystems. Our new initiative is part of our efforts to preserve and restore ecosystems and implement the EU strategy for biodiversity. And it is part of our efforts to use nature-based solutions by restoring particularly carbon-rich ecosystems to mitigate the impacts of climate change and meet our climate goals. And with the recent adoption of the 8th Environmental Action Programme, our mandate is now stronger than ever before. It stretches beyond the Green Deal of the current mandate to 2030, and it cements our long-term vision to 2050. It also lays the foundation for a resilient, well-being economy inside the planetary boundaries. It is a pledge to measure progress with values that go far beyond GDP. To bring these proposals to fruition, we need the goodwill and determination of people on the ground. Think tanks and civil society play a vital role in keeping these debates alive. You educate, you illuminate, and you bring people along on the journey. A journey that must be inclusive if we hope to succeed. Ladies and gentlemen, Thank you again for your efforts, and I wish all participants fruitful and inspiring discussions during this third edition of the Think2030 conference.
I think these were really important words from the Commissioner. But now I turn directly to Deputy Minister Dusík. Thank you very much for being with us and taking the time. I know that I hope the sound is okay. The basic questions that I have are, what are going to be the environmental and energy priorities of the incoming Czech presidency, starting not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow? And how do you think the war in Ukraine, the crisis on the energy prices and food prices, how would that impact the Green Deal agenda? Commissioner Sinkevičius has talked a lot about just transition. Is that also something that you are going to look at? And how do you frame the 6 months that you have in terms of priorities? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I too hope that the sound and picture will stay. Thank you for the invitation. Sorry I cannot be with you in person. I came just a few hours ago from Luxembourg after an intense meeting of the Environment Council with a good success at the end, and I'm greeting you from Prague. And yes, I can continue where the previous speakers, Mr. Canfin and Mr. Sinkevičius, ended, that we are facing combined crises. We had the climate crisis before, to which we've added COVID plus, and now we have added the war in Ukraine. And all of these are coming together. One or the other have not disappeared. And we are going through a stress period and a stress test of how the European Union can work together. There will be major energy concerns, or there are already. There will be major food concerns. And this is where the Czech Republic is coming with its second presidency of the European Union, of the Council. And we want to be an active player in driving the European Union through those challenging waters at the moment. And we will do so, of course, with our partners in France, with the French presidency just finishing, and with Sweden, that will continue after the 6 months of the Czech presidency, and the trio work the program that we have crafted together. And speaking after Mr. Canfin and the Commissioner, obviously the interinstitutional relation and cooperation is crucial. Mr. Canfin mentioned the number of legislative proposals that are on the table of the Parliament. I could probably add a few more pieces from the Council agenda, but many of them are in common. And of course, most importantly, on the whole dossier will be the Fit for 55 package. The Czech presidency is starting in 2 days, on the 1st of July. We have the motto of the presidency, which is borrowed from our former president Václav Havel, and it says EU as a task, and then it adds rethink, rebuild, repower. And there goes the whole program in which environment and climate agenda is a rich one. And in the context of our current crises, we will also be looking at how we can best engage on ending the conflict in Ukraine and building on with Ukraine into the future, and that includes the environmental priorities. We are hosting the informal Environment Ministers Council in the middle of July in Prague, and we are hoping that the Ukraine Minister, Mr. Strilec, will be joining us for that meeting as a new candidate country of the European Union. Obviously, the Fit for 55 package is a major achievement, congratulating the European Parliament for doing their part of the work, at least on the climate side. There's still several pieces which need to be completed. On the Council, I'm happy to acknowledge that we have completed our deliberations, and we will be ready to start the discussions with the European Parliament. And I echo Mr. Canfin in saying that we have a good platform. Of course, there's quite a lot of differences if you compare the texts, but the basics are there, the basics are valid, they are based on our Paris commitment, and they confirm the direction in which the European Union wants to go on the climate policy. Perhaps the only positive thing about what's happening with the war in Ukraine is that energy security has become an ally of climate action, and it is speeding up our efforts to decarbonize and find alternative solutions faster and with more vigor. And that is displayed in the Repower EU, the other package that is also being fast-tracked in the Council, and that will be discussed in between the two institutions also in the near future. Then the nature restoration law comes as the next priority. It was mentioned, we have welcomed the Commission proposal, and we will start discussing this major undertaking, which we see should complete the picture about dealing with nature issues in the European Union. We will also open it for initial discussion in the Environment Council meeting, the informal in July. And what we also want to do is to link the topics of nature and climate. It has been talked about, a few things have happened, but really properly connecting what are the nature solutions that can help climate, and how do we ensure that what we do in one area doesn't compromise the other. And there the RED directive, the renewable energies revision, we need to find the good balance in between maximizing the potential of renewables without hampering what we need to do with the protected nature, what we need to do with rebuilding nature at the same time. So this is the interconnection that we wanted to highlight during our presidency. Then we have a range of other legislative proposals related to the Green Deal, the Industrial Emissions Directive, the batteries regulation, the eco-design, the shipment of waste. These are all pieces where we will try to make maximum progress, where we can finish the work. We hope at least on some of them we can finalize the work. For instance, ending the trialogues with the Parliament on batteries, and we are in close touch with our Swedish colleagues on those where probably we would not be able to conclude how we can hand over. And importantly, there will be other pieces coming in from the European Commission to further roll out the Green Deal package. So they will be coming in the summer. In the autumn, we have already planned ways of incorporating them into our program. As an example, I would mention the air quality directive that is coming probably in October, and we want to start discussing that as well. So it's a rich program, and of course it acknowledges also that the European Parliament's and Commission's term is slowly coming to close. So it will be increasingly dense agenda in the interinstitutional setting, but we want to do our best as the Czech presidency to advance that. On top of this EU domestic agenda, if you will, there's also a range of international commitments that we will want to honor. One of the impacts of COVID is that all the major international events have now squeezed into the next 6 months. So we will have an incredibly busy international program, ending with the CBD, the Biodiversity Conference of Parties in December, where we are very much hopeful that we can have the new global framework for 2030. And for that, we need to do quite a bit of legwork as well. So we are looking forward to our task and to working with all the partners in the EU. I think that in spite of some of the figures in the Barometer, there is a good continuity in spite of the pressures of the tensions that we have. We are going to go through difficult periods in the coming months, but we need to persist on the environmental agenda because it is part of the overall resilience, and that's what the Czech presidency will want to contribute to. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Deputy Minister Dusík. This was really very important words for us. As Pascal Canfin was saying, this is a massive endeavor for each presidency and for the Parliament, because behind each of the laws that you're talking about, there is this negotiation of finding the progressives and working with them. So how important it is for presidencies to be able to support one another. And so that leads us to the Swedish presidency, the upcoming Swedish presidency. Måns Nilsson, Måns is the executive director of the Stockholm Environment Institute. Måns, what is your take on the priorities that we should set ourselves, and what could be the priorities of what should be the priorities of the Swedish upcoming European Union presidency?
Thank you very much. This seems to be working very good. Yes. Perfect. Just to start by a little caveat that I am not representing the Swedish government. I am an independent observer in this context. The Stockholm Environment Institute, where I work, is an independent research institute and a think tank. I want to first acknowledge, that what Didrik Samson said, that the Green Deal was not killed despite the pandemic and despite the Ukraine war and Russian invasion. This is actually a remarkable resilience and institutionalization of the Green Deal agenda in Europe across the bodies of the European Union. We've had good progress, and I mean, this conference now comes on the back of the negotiations in Luxembourg, which are very encouraging. I'm much more optimistic now than I was a couple of months ago. But of course, we see there are some reduced ambitions in some packages. For example, Social Climate Fund, which has been downscaled slightly to from 72 to 59, and also removing requirements for matching funds. We have some problematic features in that. But overall, it is a positive picture that the coming presidencies can build on for sure. But I do think we need to acknowledge that the politics have shifted significantly over the last 6 months, and that will shape how the Green Deal is perceived and acted upon over the coming couple of years. The Ukraine war has perhaps not shifted, but it has reinforced a trend towards security as a priority narrative for governments across Europe. Governments are not obstacles to European policy. They are working on a democratic logic according to what is front of mind on the agenda and in the populations. And today it is outer security, followed by inner security and supply chain security, etc. So we have the threat by Russia. Only last night, Sweden forged a deal with Turkey to be able to be accession or sort of candidate invited to join NATO together with Finland. Turkey had made some requests and demands for this to be true that would have been unthinkable a couple of years ago. And now we are in a new logic. The big game for the Green Deal is to resonate with the new narrative, I think. For 10 years ago, my institute, SEI, was collaborating with the World Resources Institute and others to set up something called the New Climate Economy Project. And it was delivering insights on how you can improve climate performance at the same time as improving your economy. And this became a powerful narrative. It was already cooking. It did perhaps not on its own shift debates, I'm not sure, but at least it was picked up a lot, and we have seen over the last 5 to 10 years an enormous interest and commitment from private sector and from economic policy institutions and departments and ministries to work on climate. Now it's about security. So we need to establish the knowledge base on how Europe can improve its security, its inner, outer supply chain security, by improving climate performance and being more sustainable. I think this will be determining But I'm optimistic about it because if we look at the evidence base, there are so many positive synergies between improving your security and invest in the things that we have in Fit for 55. My third point, I would say, as Didrik Samson said again, this is the biggest package that Europe has ever done, and Pascal gave some insight into just how ambitious and important, but considering also as a member or a citizen of a very small country in Europe with a very trimmed governmental bureaucracy, to be able to follow and deal with these folders, the legislative and regulatory intensity of this Commission in the current phase of the European Commission is unprecedented. And it's necessary, and it's obvious because things have to be fixed at once. But I'm worried sometimes about the mental health of my colleagues back in the ministry that are trying to cope. And I think this will lead to some setbacks just because of the complexity. You know, the European Commission, according to Google, it has 32,000 employees or people working for them. And most of them are very smart and working very hard. But how are countries, smaller countries, going to keep up and implement with the thousands of pages of regulatory text and technical guidelines? I think this is a thing that maybe needs to be considered a bit also. I was trying to follow for some years during as an active researcher the complexity of the energy portfolio and the legislative agenda. And even as a researcher, it was almost impossible to keep up. It comes from a political science. He's very happy to be here in Sciences Po. In the 70s and 80s, there was a strand called implementation research. It's not so active anymore, this academic tradition, but it is about how policies actually meet the realities on the ground and how, and I think it would be an interesting topic for political scientists, also how European policy machinery hits the countries on the ground. Finally, to mention something about my expectations on the Swedish presidency, which comes in January 23. First of all, we have an election in between in September, which is totally unpredictable. We have a very weak Green Party that is looking like it might drop out of parliament. They have been a watchdog in the present coalition to make sure that climate and environment stays high on the agenda. And we did see a drop in the commitment when they left the government 6 months ago. So it's if you talk to the government, they don't really want to say anything about priorities. One thing they are mentioning a lot, or the only thing I've heard consistently is circular economy agenda, where there is quite potential for guidelines, protocols, European initiative, maybe to a large degree. It was also a rather big theme in the recent Stockholm Plus 50 conference, which was the UN meeting in Stockholm just early June, which celebrated 50 years of the Stockholm Conference 72. Also, maybe Sweden would like to pioneer some work on sustainable consumption policies. This is an area where there has become sort of a political agreement in Sweden, which I think is amongst the first in the world, to start developing policy frameworks to induce and trigger more sustainable lifestyles, behaviors, consumption patterns. The external agenda, Europe in the world, recognition from a small country again that what we do in Europe is important as a soft power and as a innovator, but we are really not controlling much of the world's emissions anymore. I guess European greenhouse gas emissions are now down to like 6 or 7% of the global. So those are some themes that I think will come up during the preparation discussions, and we look forward to following and supporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Måns.